2 weeks ago, SmackDown featured a rerun of the match between Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman at Money in the Bank. That week and many weeks before, they were apparently forgetting that they had a lot of talented women backstage that were just not being used, one of them being, for example, former champion Naomi. I'm glad they've realised these women are there. Now you just have to give them actual storylines instead of whatever the hell this is. Yes, Naomi deserves better. I'm Tom Collihew and welcome to this week's SmackDown review. We talk a lot of exclusive news and in-depth insight here at least twice a week, so be sure to be clicking subscribe. Today's video will include exclusive news on Matt Riddle, Daniel Bryan, Baron Corbin, Bray Wyatt and the Swamp Fight, and the aforementioned Naomi. Stay tuned for more. SmackDown opens with a mixed recap and hype package, mostly focused on the Intercontinental Championship main event between AJ Styles and Matt Riddle. Also featured is Alexa Bliss hyping her mystery guest, as well as when they move into live, the match tonight between Big E and Cesaro, which will determine what the stipulation is for the SmackDown Tag Team Championship match at Extreme Rules. That match was only technically added this week. Cesaro and Big E open the show, and I feel like I've been waiting for this match basically my entire life. Big E spearing Cesaro into the ring steps in the opening few seconds really helps to reinforce this. Cesaro, due to interference from Nakamura, does pick up the win, meaning that both Nakamura and Cesaro have wins over their opponents respectively in singles matches. Nakamura vs Kingston was a good match, as was this, as I feel the fact that both men involved today were much more powerful really helped to sell their particular feud and battle. After the match, the New Day combine in an attempt to put Cesaro through a table, however Nakamura does manage to help him escape. I've got to say, as big a fan as I am of the New Day, and the New Day do know that I'm a big fan, I tell you that, I do hope to see a title change at Extreme Rules, because I feel it's about time that Nakamura and Cesaro had a chance to really shine. They've been looking for at least an engaging storyline for a long time now, so why not now? In addition, as per the stipulation, I don't think anyone is particularly surprised that it's a tables match, given the tables have been involved for the last 2 weeks. 3 weeks, the last 3 weeks. What a shock. Corbin cuts a "Watch Out Matt Riddle" promo backstage. Even in the few weeks before Matt Riddle debuted, Corbin was in a position of doing favours, essentially for newer talent. He was working with Otis, taking losses there and making Otis look good, and this time he has been told he will be making Matt Riddle look good. While Corbin's had a sustained push for a long time, I think now is a great time for him to be giving back. Additionally, I think his next big win will be a big championship. Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross were in the ring after the break to hype up the appearance of their special guest. There's been a lot of speculation over the week that it would be Stephanie McMahon announcing Evolution 2. I can assure you Evolution 2.0 is coming. It is one of the reasons that we had Evolution shown on Fox Sports 1 recently, as I have mentioned on my Twitter. Unfortunately, that was not the guest today. Sasha Banks and Bayley would come down beforehand, probably walking straight past the special guest to do so, good old logic there, to cut what has been the same promo they've been cutting for a while now. The special guest was Asuka, who, as a result of coming down, distracted everyone long enough for Sasha Banks and Bayley to attack Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. The fact that there are so many names now involved make it extremely difficult to keep up with all of these names without accidentally saying the wrong surname. Especially with so many B surnames. Banks, Bayley, Bliss, it gets confusing. End result here is a match with Asuka and Nikki Cross against Sasha Banks and Bayley. Now, we've seen several incarnations of this match recently with a few different people dropped out and dropped in. We've seen Bliss and Cross versus Banks and Bayley. We've seen Asuka and Kairi Sane against Banks and Bayley. We've seen another Bliss and Cross against Banks and Bayley. We've seen Bayley versus Asuka. We've seen Cross versus Banks. We've seen Banks versus Bliss. We've seen basically every possible combination. So while I think they do well to continue swapping people as they do, we need something new after these feuds are over. It's a very good thing that Shayna Baszler and Kairi Sane are back and will be major players in the build to SummerSlam. We once again, after the hype package at the beginning, go to Daniel Bryan, who gives his thoughts on this particular matchup from his home, where I've reported that he went back immediately after more COVID-19 cases were discovered in the WWE. It's nice that they're keeping this particular feud going because Daniel Bryan versus AJ Styles is still the end result planned. Apparently the idea of Daniel Bryan endorsing Matt Riddle is to endorse Matt Riddle in front of new fans who may not be aware of him or may simply not be fans. This was apparently WWE's idea instead of Daniel Bryan's. Daniel Bryan, of course, was advocating for Drew Gulak to work with him. We get a sight of Bray Wyatt at the swamp where the swamp fight will be taking place. This was filmed right before the match was filmed. The match has already been filmed quite recently. There are a number of stunts planned and a number of big spots that are apparently going to blow our minds. So I'm excited for this one. It is planned to main event at the moment. How do you feel about Bray Wyatt's return and the fact that The Fiend has vanished since WrestleMania? Let me know in the comments. To hype this match, they had John Morrison working with Braun Strowman. The match lasted about a minute. Lacey Evans cut a promo on Naomi before their match. It was 1 sentence long. Now, Naomi has apparently upset a few WWE officials with her comments on Instagram recently, particularly the creative team who wrote out the karaoke contest segment. However, this apparently had nothing to do with the match finish here, because the finish was always supposed to be Lacey Evans picking up the win to endorse her heel run. The idea apparently was that Lacey Evans was able to distract Naomi by tying her hair on the rope. However, she clearly did not tie her hair on the rope, and then that distraction led Naomi to turn into the woman's right and a clean win by Lacey Evans. I expect Lacey Evans to also pick up wins against Dana Brooke and Tamina in the next couple of weeks in order to basically just be built up as a heel again. Probably then start working with Mandy Rose when Mandy Rose returns. I don't think people have realised how much they may have missed Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville. As an aside, if the end result of this feud is hair versus hair, I am not going to be happy. Jeff Hardy talks about Sheamus. There's nothing new. Nothing makes it better than it has been. I can't look at Jeff Hardy's ears anymore without seeing that screwdriver from Randy Orton. Sorry, Jeff. Sheamus would interfere with the backstage segment in which Jeff Hardy was talking, attack him, do some talking, nothing new, nothing better. Their match will apparently be next week on SmackDown instead of Extreme Rules, so that's new, different. I can't wait for this feud to be over. Sasha Banks and Bayley are essentially asked, will you win on Sunday? Bayley does Steiner math in response, but if science. I could get behind Bayley science, why not? Nikki Cross then talks about her current losing streak, loses her temper completely when she sees sight of Bayley and attacks her from behind. They are eventually pulled apart not by officials, but by Alexa Bliss and Sasha Banks. We get a repeat of Styles and Riddle talking earlier, and then an Attitude Era style Matt Riddle walks directly into the camera part right before the break. They really are struggling for people right now, aren't they? Good match as you might expect. Matt Riddle continually hit major offense and moves that other wrestlers do use as finishers. Styles, however, was very resilient and was unable to be put down. Styles eventually did pick up the win via a roll-up, so he escaped Matt Riddle. I do have questions about how quickly Matt Riddle has already taken his first main roster loss, but when you get put against AJ Styles, that's to be expected. Out of character for AJ, he stops and lingers after the match to shake hands with Matt Riddle in a showing of respect. He then doesn't try and help when Baron Corbin appears and attacks Matt Riddle. Standard AJ Styles. The handshake might suggest more of a face turn, or at least a relaxing of AJ Styles' current heel dynamic. However, I also said that about Seth Rollins when he shook Drew McIntyre's hand, and the next night he ripped Rey Mysterio's eye out. Could be a lot of things. The show ended with Baron Corbin delivering the end of days to Matt Riddle. Corbin, as I've mentioned, will be working with Riddle going forwards. SmackDown was a bit all over the place this week. They were hyping Extreme Rules, they were also hyping the SmackDown show a week from now, and they also ended on their main event segment by hyping something that wasn't related to Extreme Rules and had nothing announced for next week. So as a go-home show, I've got to say, bit of a failure. That said, there were some entertaining segments. Biggie vs Cesaro was a good match, the women's tag match was very effective, and of course Matt Riddle vs AJ Styles was a fun match, well worth watching, and with a sort of surprise ending, even though I don't think anyone expected Matt Riddle to actually take the championship. Unfortunately, the first half of the second hour was simply poor. Morrison vs Braun Strowman, especially after Morrison and Miz lost a handicap match to Braun Strowman, was a bit of a non-starter, even though the idea was, of course, that Braun Strowman is being haunted by Bray Wyatt. In addition to that, the Naomi vs Lacey Evans feud is built on a shaky premise and is moving forward shakily. They need to get a bit more writing into this and a bit more logical storytelling, or at least do something. I do have questions about Braun Strowman's current championship run. It's not been the strongest, and a lot of that is down to a lack of opponents that he has, or at least has worked with. it makes it look considerably worse that Drew McIntyre on Raw is having a very good WWE Championship run so far. SmackDown has everything it needs to succeed. In many ways, it just has to get out of its own way. I want to thank you for watching. I've been Tom Collihew. Thank you for joining me.